Hello and welcome to the Therapy Floor with Doctors Ritz and Vicky.
We are on the floor, getting deep into the human experience, unpacking people's everyday dilemmas through the lens of two psychologists.
So let's start with unpacking our first dilemma.
Let's go.
Today. Okay. So our first dilemma comes from a male in his 40s, and he says there are a lot of tools and suggestions on how to deal with childhood traumas, etc. But how does one know when one has overcome these traumas? I.e., what are the signs to look out for once we have been successful in rewiring the subconscious brain? Good question.
I think it's a really interesting question, and I actually think there's two parts to what this guy is actually saying. I think the first part is there's an understanding of maybe something quite scientific that's measurable. Like, how do I know when, I think what he's actually saying is, how do I know when I'm feeling better, when maybe my symptoms of trauma are not in control of me and I feel more in control of them. And I wonder if it actually might be quite helpful to talk about what trauma looks like.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So when we think of trauma, you know, that word gets used, I think, quite a lot at the moment. But maybe if we understand it from the way we're trained, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and understanding it as part of the anxiety family.
Yeah.
And what we tend to see with clients and with people that are presenting with this condition is they're going to feel very, very overwhelmed. They're going to really struggle to regulate their emotions. They're going to feel quite numb. They're going to suffer with a lot of flashbacks, a lot of nightmares, carry a lot of tension in their body. There are things like their concentration is going to really decrease. Their memory recall is going to go downhill. So we tend to see a lot that you know, their long-term and their short-term memory gets really, really impacted by it. And then I think we can further describe it, you know, take it that one step further, which is complex trauma, which I don't think gets that much light on it. You know, you often hear PTSD, but complex trauma is also part of that family.
Yeah, and that may be what he's alluding to because he said childhood traumas, etc. So, I mean, yeah, so complex trauma or complex PTSD can really arise as a result of, you know, childhood abuse or neglect or abandonment. It can arise from, you know, witnessing or experiencing yourself domestic violence. It can arise if you have been unfortunate to have been, you know, manipulated or forced into things like prostitution, slavery. Prisoners of war can experience this. So I think there is that element of it being just deeply impactful to one's sense of self, because some of the symptoms can look like feelings of worthlessness and shame, emotional dysregulation, really difficulty forming trust in relationships, so difficulty forming and maintaining relationships. It can look like emotional flashbacks. So it can be really impactful to one's sense of self and their experience of everyday life. So I get why, you know, this is really important for this individual to understand or to know what are the markers that I've actually moved on, that I'm dealing with this, that I'm healing and I'm moving on. And maybe we can also speak about the treatments.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because he said there's lots of skills and techniques out there. So it might be, if people are thinking, oh, this might be something I'm struggling with.
Yeah.
You know, what can I do to help myself? Or what can I go and ask my GP for? Or if I'm searching for a therapist, what can I look for?
Yeah. So the good thing is there isn't one, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but maybe it just is what it is.
I think it's a good thing because it's, do you know what I really like about psychology and psychotherapy and therapy and counselling and all that, everything that falls under this umbrella, is that we can't put people in boxes.
I know, yeah.
So actually when you said that, I was like, I like that there's different things out there for different people and different personalities.
You know what, you're right, because I think, you know, I have come across people who have undergone, you know, one particular type of treatment and they feel like it's failed or they failed if it hasn't worked for them. And then, you know, they're thinking, gosh, like, is it me? Am I just too unfixable? So yeah, I think it it is good that there are different approaches that we can take. So one approach is trauma-informed cognitive behavioural therapy, CBT. That can be really effective. And EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing.
There's a tongue twister, that one.
I always forget what the EMDR stands for. So I said it. Okay, so EMDR is also really highly effective for trauma and also complex trauma.
And really what all of these treatments are doing, the best way I really like to describe it is, imagine your traumatic experiences, like this fellow was talking about, like whatever he's experienced in his childhood, maybe before he sought treatment, I want you to imagine it like a linen cupboard in your home, like an airing cupboard. And it's, all your towels, all your sheets, your pillows, your extra duvets, all of that's in there. And when you walk past this cupboard, the doors, they just go whoosh, they fling open, everything comes out. Yeah. And when you are in that heightened sense and you're not able to deal with it, you're feeling very out of control, your emotions are on top of you, you're feeling so overwhelmed you can't think, you just react. And the reaction is scramble, 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 pick everything up, chuck it back in, shut the doors, and just keep going until it happens again, and then it happens again. But what these treatments, what they do is, in a very safe, very slow, and a very protected way, what your therapist would be helping you to do is to open those doors, take out each individual item, be it those memories, learn to look at them safely, and then fold them away and neatly put them back in their place where they belong. And that really gives the person a sense of autonomy and control. So when this guy here is saying, how do I know that I'm doing better? It's when you feel in control. And I think the thing with trauma is, when I speak to clients that have experienced trauma, and when we have come through part of it or the other side of it, and I want to come on to this and this idea about healing, but just more like coming through part of it or the other side of it. One thing I hear time and time again, acceptance is a huge thing. And not acceptance that it's okay what happened, but acceptance from a perspective of, I accept this is a part of my story and I'm back in control of that, because trauma is about being out of control. You are never in control of what happened to you. And that is what was so scary and threatening and terrifying. So it's taking that control back. And I think that's a huge part of the acceptance process.
And taking it back in a way that is actually conducive and effective. Because for some people, taking control back may look like, right, I'm just not going to trust anyone again. If I've been let down in my relationships, if I've had people that have, the people that were supposed to be caring for me the most and looking after me have neglected me or abused me, what more other people? So therefore, I'm not going to trust anyone. I'm going to be independent. I'm going to, depend on myself. So I think it's helpful to also think about how one healthily gets control back and what that could look like. Or, for example, control could look like, right, I experienced a really distressing motorbike accident. So therefore, I am never going to ride a motorbike, or I'm never going to get in a car. Or, do you know what I mean? So I think, how we gain that control back can be really helpful or unhelpful.
And that's where I think therapy can be really helpful, is when you have that trusting relationship with your therapist, that hopefully as they get to understand you and your coping mechanisms, the behaviours that you're engaging with, that they can challenge that in a way that's therapeutic, obviously. But as you said, to be able to say, well, you not getting back on that motorbike, or you not getting back on that in the car, is that helping you or is that hindering you? And looking at what's become protective in a healthy way and what's become maybe an unhealthy coping mechanism as a response to what's happened. Because that's, it's quite quite a normal process for us to form these coping mechanisms when things happen to us.
Right, it's a way of protecting ourselves.
This is it.
It's a method of survival. But there comes a point where actually we need to stop surviving and we actually need to start living or thriving, as people say. And there comes a point where that protection is no longer needed in that way. So it's better to actually change that and to adapt rather than to keep plugging ahead and forging ahead with the same method or mode of protection, self-protection.
Yeah. And I really like what you said there about adapting, because it is an adaptive response where you can then adapt again. And I think, this is what he was talking about, this idea of how do I know that I've rewired my brain. I think what he's actually talking about there is this idea of neuroplasticity. So if you haven't, heard of that before, what that really means is when we experience trauma, our brains start to change configuration. So what we start to see in our brain is, very long-term impact of trauma can have structural changes. So the size of our hippocampus, where like memory is stored, starts to decrease. We are going to be using the more emotional part of our brain, which is the amygdala, the place in our brain where we really use rational thinking, the prefrontal cortex, that starts to get used less. And so that's going to have an impact on how we are thinking, how we are processing emotions, and then how we're going to behave. I think that's one of the really fascinating and beautiful things about the brain is the fact that it can repair itself, it can rewire itself. We have something like, I think it's like 86 million neurons firing in our brain, and we have the ability to light up new pathways by doing things like going to therapy, exercising, having social experiences, having a positive environment around us is going to fire up these neurons and create these new pathways in our brain. So the more we do it, the more we're going to rewire, and the stronger those those connections, those experiences, those grooves between the neurons are going to have on us and are going to form. And so that's one part of, what he's saying about successfully rewiring the brain. But then that's another little nuance that I picked up on. And I think you did as well, this idea of this successful healing process. I'm healed.
Yeah.
I'm cured. I'm fixed.
Yeah, this idea of healing and becoming fixed, it makes sense, because when we have experienced brokenness, and we really felt like, we've gone through some really difficult times, we want to know that the likelihood of us experiencing this again, the likelihood of us experiencing distressing things again, traumatic things again, we don't want to feel the impact of that again. We don't necessarily want to go through it. But I would say that despite how distressing these experiences can be, and I'm not trying to minimize or say that it's a good thing that difficult and painful things happen to us. However, at the same time, I think they do contribute to our story. They don't have to be our full and complete story, but I don't think that by taking them out, it makes our story any better. I actually think that the concept of like post-traumatic growth, the story that you tell yourself, the meaning, the resilience, the, how you use it to set yourself up for further success in life can be so important. So yes, you don't necessarily want to have the remnants of these symptoms interfering with your everyday life and stopping you from having like a fulfilling life. But I also think that to be healed doesn't mean that we forget. It doesn't mean that we eradicate certain things that have happened to us. I think that they help to inform our story, and our stories can carry so much power, so much meaning. It's just how we look at it, and we can use it to kind of springboard us into other experiences and into life.
Definitely. I think our stories shape us.
Yeah.
And I'm not the biggest fan of words like cure and fixed and healed. I think healing, yes, we are all on a healing process.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's the key word here, process. Like this is this thing that we're calling life, what we're all living every day, it's a process. So when somebody says to me, you know, when will I be fixed, or when will I have completely rewired the brain, or when will I stop doing this? I don't think we ever do, you know, until the day we cease to exist. I really don't think that we do, because firstly, you know, you're not going to wipe out these memories within you, or these reflexes that you have within your mind, your body, your brain. You're not going to wipe those out. So, you know, I often say to my clients, imagine, you know, you've been wearing, or you've been right-handed your whole life, and your left hand has been in a cast, and then I cut the cast off and I train you how to use your left hand, but then like out of nowhere I'm like, hey, catch, and you're gonna just go for your right hand again, because that's what you're, you know, you've got all that muscle memory there. So it's the same thing. I don't think we're ever going to erase that muscle memory, and that's, as you saying, it forms part of who we are. It forms part of our story, and the stories that we, you know, that we have are stories that we can share. And I think that's part of the beauty of vulnerability. Something a client actually said to me recently, and I did ask him if I could share this. He said to me, you know, what I've been through, I never thought I would go through. I never thought I would go through. And I've been very scared of my own vulnerability, of what I've been through. But in the last kind of 6 months, as he's been growing from this experience and has started to talk to people about it, I think he cited, I've shared this story with 50 people or something of that number, and each one of them has been a positive response. And I think connection is part of that healing process, the connection we get from being vulnerable with somebody, hearing someone's vulnerability, and having that empathic connection with them.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. So I think, to kind of like come full circle with this, I think well done on getting through some horrific experiences, childhood traumas. But I really want to come back to that linen cupboard example that you gave. How you may know that you are progressing and processing and moving on, moving through your experiences of trauma, that you can take out the pieces. There can be some order. The symptoms don't eclipse you, overwhelm you. They don't just pop out. There can be some order. There can be some control. There can be some understanding. So I think the symptoms reducing would be a good sign that you are moving forwards.
I think it's a really good indicator to know, and to check in with yourself. Maybe, you know, I would, when somebody's finished therapy, I often say to them, hold that time, but maybe like on a monthly basis, where you're checking in with yourself.
Yeah.
You know, use those parameters of where you were when you started therapy to where you are now, and just go back and check, like, how have I been this month? What have my symptoms looked like? How have I felt? What have I been thinking? What old behaviours have maybe creeped back up in, or what triggers are maybe still there? And it's a good way to stay on the process.
Yeah.
I hope that answers the question.
Thank you for sending us that question.
It was a really good one.
Yeah. Should we move to the second dilemma?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay.
So our next dilemma comes in from a lady in her 40s who says, I have self-confidence issues that hold me back in following my dreams. I tend to have imposter syndrome in everything I do. I always feel that people will judge my choices and behaviours negatively, and I think and talk very negatively about myself. For example, I love gardening and I would love to design outdoor spaces for people, but I'm worried they may think I'm not qualified enough. I also worry that my family and friends might not think this is intellectual enough, or that I don't have enough ambition. My lack of self-confidence and my imposter syndrome are holding me back. What can I do? What are you thinking, V?
Well, I'm thinking a couple of things. There is the imposter syndrome there. There is the fear of judgment and fear of being critiqued. And then there's also the personal self-talk, which seems to be very critical. And I guess a lack of trust in really knowing what she can do and how to move forward, or even knowing what she wants to do. So yeah, so I think there's two major things there that I want to think about, which is her internal world, so the imposter syndrome, and also the negative self-talk, but then also this fear of judgment from other people, particularly those that are supposed to be closest to her, and she's feeling like, or she's anticipating that they will judge her really harshly. They'll think that she's not good enough, she's not ambitious enough. They would look down upon her choice of being a gardener. Yeah, which is quite sad, isn't it? It's quite sad.
Well, her environment, like what you're saying there is it's not just her internal world that's negative. Her environment is actually quite negative.
Seems so.
Yeah. From the way she's describing it.
So I think let's start with the external world, because I think the internal world is a bigger thing to address, really. But it's so important that we intentionally place ourselves in environments that will cause us to thrive and will cause us to flourish. If we just want to take the garden example, of being in a place where, you know, the temperature is right, the soil is right, there are enough nutrients going in, there's access to shade and covering when there needs to be. And even though we can't choose our family, we definitely can choose our friends. And I think that if her perception of her family is correct, and I say if, not to be invalidating, but I think sometimes we can project and we can have assumptions about what other people may think of us because of our own internal assumptions and our own internal world. But if what she perceives is right, then she may need to think twice about, I guess, the access that she has with them, the access that they have to her, but also in terms of sharing those things that are vulnerable, that we feel quite vulnerable about, the things that are precious to us, that we're trying to protect and nurture. There are times where we actually don't place those ideas or those things in the path of people who will be really critical and will really like hamper our progress. And there may be a time to share and there's a time not to share. But also being surrounded by people who may intentionally or unintentionally cause you harm, psychological harm, emotional harm, isn't great. I don't know what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know what her living circumstances are. So, you know, as you said, I very much agree with, we can't choose our family, but we can choose our friends. So, you know, if she's living with her family and she can't get away from this, and she's not, you know, in the circumstances to be getting away from it, I'd be wondering, right, how can she protect herself in that sense of, and I think it is about sharing or choosing what you share with people and choosing the right people to share the right things with, knowing where you're going to get the best support from for yourself. So if you're living with your family and you know that's not a situation that you're able to change, then how do you get the best out of that situation so you're not looking to them to fill up the cup that you need filling where they're not able to fill it? So if we know that, you know, they have these ideas and ambitions for you that go against what you want for yourself, then going to them about career advice probably isn't going to be your best. No.
And before we get onto that stage, though, I'm also thinking about conversations that can be had to determine whether this is something that can change or not. And whether there is a level of transparency that needs to occur, and more vulnerability and courage to share how you feel, and to share, you know, to the people that are most important to you, you know, I often find that at times I really want to share something with you, a risk that I want to take, something that I find really important to me, but I find myself worrying about your response. And I'm afraid of feeling rejected or judged or being thought of as not good enough. And you can even extend this to also say, if you feel safe enough, because that's something that I battle with it anyway. I'm feeling that within myself. So then I also worry about other people kind of validating that fear and see what they say. See what their response is to that. And if there is a positive response, you can go further in saying, you know, when I do share X, Y, and Z with you, or when I am going through a new season in my life, I would really appreciate it if you could support me through X, Y, and Z. This is what support for me could look like. I would really appreciate that. Do you think that's something you can do? And see what they say.
I wonder if she knows what support for her looks like.
That's a good question. Yeah.
Because I know we said we were going to stay external, but sometimes we have to go a little bit internal to think about what we need from other people. Because sometimes we place pressure on other people to give us things that we don't even know what we need.
And the things that we can't even give ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So what is it that she needs? Can she articulate it to herself first? Can she start to provide bits for herself as well?
Yeah.
So then I feel that will also give her the confidence to ask if those needs can be met from her family, from her friends.
Yeah.
Whoever it is in her system, in her family, friends system.
Yeah. So should we go there? Should we think more about her internal world?
Yeah, because I'm thinking there's so much, as you said, there's a lot about expectations, there's a lot about judgment, which has obviously happened externally, which is now happening internally to her.
Yeah.
And this idea of her being an imposter, like she has the capacity to think of what she values. She has the capacity to think about what brings her joy. I like gardening. I like the idea of being creative, of landscaping, of bringing ideas to people's homes.
Yeah.
That in itself is a really big step.
Yeah.
I've met some people that don't even know that yet. What is it they want to do? So I feel like the fact that she knows it is really, really positive for her.
Yeah.
And I would want to be starting with that. So already something about yourself, but there's this fear holding you back.
Yeah.
You're calling it imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. Good question. Because this is another word that I think is kind of like a buzzword of recent. That feeling of not being good enough, that feeling of being caught out, that feeling that you're not as good as you really think you are. And that you're somehow like playing a role, and having a very narrow view of what success could look like and attributing it to external factors, achievements. And therefore, if there are a lack of those things, then you would class yourself as a failure. So that's what imposter syndrome can look like.
I think it's also this idea that you can accomplish all of these things, but in the background, you're just waiting for someone to like catch you out and say you're a fraud. You don't deserve to be here.
Yeah.
You don't deserve this. Yes, you've got all these accomplishments, but no, you're not good enough. It just does not.
Or they're not enough.
Yeah, they're not enough. It doesn't add up. And then that creates like so much self-doubt within you and can really play into this fear of failure.
Yeah.
Because you're on edge, aren't you? You're just waiting for somebody to come and snatch it away.
Pull you down.
Yeah.
And it can also stop you from actually starting in the first place, which is what is happening here. That fear of starting and getting it wrong, or perfectionism, thinking that it has to be top tier, gold standard straight away, when actually it may not look like that at the start. But does that mean she's a failure? Does that mean that she isn't successful? Does it mean that she's not good at what she does? No. So I think it's quite interesting how imposter syndrome can really show up, and there are there are 5 subtypes of imposter syndrome, which I think we can share.
Yeah.
Just for interest, if anyone is interested. So we have the soloist. And this is somebody who believes that in order to be viewed as successful and competent and good enough, they have to get everything done by themselves. Asking for help is a sign of weakness. So, a soloist is someone who plays an instrument by themselves, right? And that is a subtype of imposter syndrome. The fear that if you don't appear in this way or you don't behave in that way, you're seen as a fraud. Then we have the perfectionist, which we've just briefly touched on, which is the idea that if everything isn't performed to the gold standard, to the best of your abilities, again, it's failure. It equals failure. You are a fraud. You're not good enough. And that's a really hard one to get around, I think.
I think so, because I think with that one, it's you want everything to be perfect because you're so worried that people could come and pick holes in it.
Yeah.
And then say to you, see, you're not good enough. See, you missed that bit. Or look, you didn't think about this.
And this can be so all-consuming because it can stop you from starting, but also when you start, it can stop you from stopping because you have to keep having like iterations and iterations in order to make it perfect, or you have to keep going or giving more. And it can feel really, really draining.
It's really bringing me images of an octopus to mind.
Okay. Say more.
Just this idea of 8 legs, or 8 limbs, just trying to do everything at once to make sure that everything's perfect so that you don't get caught out.
Yeah.
I like using sea creatures or animals to visualize. Yeah, with my clients.
Okay. I find octopus is quite scary.
Do you?
Yeah. But anyway,
they're quite smart.
I know, that's what makes them very scary. They're so intelligent and they have all these legs and they can just, anyway, yeah. And then we have another third subtype of imposter syndrome, and this is the super person. Superman, superwoman, super person. And this is, again, someone who thinks that they have to get everything right. They have to be the one to do it all. Again, otherwise, you are looked upon as a fraud.
I think that happens in motherhood quite a lot.
Oh,
I feel like society is pushing mothers to be super mums, and I really, really do not like that term. Again, I think I've said that twice today now. Because I feel like it sets people up for failure.
Yeah.
Do it all.
There's no middle ground.
No, there isn't. There isn't. I think it's focus on one thing and you can do that, and you can have these other areas that are going on in the background, and then you focus on that. And then you focus on that. But doing everything all at once to be this superhuman, to do it perfectly, it just doesn't exist. It's going to lead to burnout, exhaustion.
Yeah.
It's not fair.
Yeah.
And I don't think we should be placing that on anyone. Don't think we should be placing it on ourselves.
No. Definitely not.
No. It kind of happened to us, didn't it? A little bit, I think, when we were setting this up.
Say more.
When we were... Are you my therapist?
I was just thinking, are you going to expose us? But anyway.
No, but I guess, we talked about it in our first episode about how we had this idea of setting up this podcast, and it's been years in the making. Yeah. And I think at times maybe we got a bit held up on it has to be like this, this and this, and it stopped us from progressing, didn't it? It stopped us moving forward. It stopped us even starting at times.
Yeah. It nearly stopped this episode going out because of the light coming in and out,
There you go. See, and I was just like, it's fine.
I know, I was like, it's not good enough. The light.
Sorry about the light, guys.
Yeah, apologies.
But you can still hear us. That's what matters.
Yeah. Then we have the expert subtype, and this is when an individual feels like if they don't know everything about a particular subject, or they haven't mastered every skill, or maybe they're a beginner at something, maybe aka this lady who may be starting out in this new career pathway, again, they think that they're not good enough. And the thought of having to start from the bottom and work their way up and not already have arrived and not already be the expert is a sign of weakness or a sign that they're not good enough. So in that sense, that they can feel like an imposter.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because that person is basically saying, I want to have learned everything without making any mistakes.
Yeah.
But doesn't our greatest learning come from making mistakes?
It does. But it's really hard to accept that. Really hard to accept that, particularly when you are very critical of yourself.
But I think that maybe if we didn't place so much importance on the things we do, and we almost like said, right, this is going to be an experiment. And then if it goes great, well, great. But if it doesn't, what have I learned from it? You know, like when you write your conclusion in your research, or like when we had to write our conclusions in our research studies, like what did we learn from this experiment that we set up? What would we do next time? How would you make it better?
There's always a way
to make it better, or to learn from something, or to get something to go in a different direction. You know, I'm getting a bit of memory from Surrey and grounded theory now. As I'm saying it with good old Dora. When you're starting something new, or you're, you know, trying something or setting something up for yourself, and you have all these experts out there that on the face of it look like they know what they're saying and doing, which they obviously do, but there has obviously been some learning and some mistakes along their journey, which is obviously not as prevalent as, you know, what we see. So that's probably feeding into her own anxieties as well.
I could say so. I could see that happening. Then we have the natural genius subtype. And this is when someone feels like they should just naturally be good at something. They should just naturally get it. And if they don't, again, they can see themselves as a failure. And I think this one particularly shows up, I find, in the clinic room with people who have been naturally good or naturally seen as naturally very clever or intelligent at school. Maybe they went to a small school and they were gifted, or they were the best in the class. So that's the expectation they have. And then their world broadens when they go to secondary school, or when they go to university, or they go into the workplace, and there's more people around them who are equally as, you know, competent. And then it's suddenly like, oh my gosh, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was, because you're looking at other people and judging yourself based on other people. So that's another form of imposter syndrome that can kick in. If I don't naturally have it, if I'm not naturally intelligent or skilled in an area, I'm a fraud. I'm not great. And then we have the final one, which is the super person. And this is someone who thinks that they have to be the best, the highest achiever. Their work has to be of the best gold standard in order for them to feel worthy. And if their work isn't, or they are not seen as the best, again, they can feel like a fraud. So those are the 5 subtypes of imposter syndrome. And I think what is really evident with this individual is that there are things that, I guess there is the perfectionism, there is the fear of what people will say, which is preventing her from starting in the first place. But then also there may be okay, yes, I am creative, and yes, I have all these ideas, but can I do it? Can I be a beginner? Can I start at the bottom and work my way up? Or will I deem myself to be an imposter because I'm not yet at the top and I've not yet made a success of myself?
But I think also what's driving all of that is fear.
Of course.
Like, that's the emotion behind it. It's fear. And I'd be really wanting to understand her relationship to fear growing up. How was she taught about fear? How was she taught to overcome it? What were the, you know, safety mechanisms in place for emotional fear?
Yeah. Because what are you thinking? Are you thinking that fear feels overwhelming for her, or that she wants to run from from fear?
I think it's paralyzing her. I think she's in a paralysis state. Like she just doesn't even want to walk.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I say she's got these ideas, but she doesn't want to walk forward, and she's so afraid of walking forward. Like she hasn't got the capacity to hold herself to be like, yeah, this is scary, this is new, and mum and dad might not like it. Your friends might think, oh, what are you doing this for? You know, she's getting a bit of a condescending attitude actually from people, or she's worried, about this condescending attitude. But there's that capacity there. There's not that capacity there, rather, of her saying, okay, these people can say all of this, and it is going to be scary, but I've got you. I can hold you. Let's do it. Let's do it together.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think teaching somebody about fear is such an important thing to do, or teaching a child about fear is such an important thing to do. Like, rather than, I think sometimes people get this wrong idea that we're meant to shelter them from things, like we're meant to shelter them from mistakes, we're meant to shelter them from fear, we're meant to protect them. And I don't think that actually is very protective. You know, when I think about protecting my children, I want to protect them in a way where I can teach them to hold their own emotions over time. Like that's how I see them protecting themselves in the world. And one of the most wonderful books that I've read with my son, which talks about emotions, and we have this concept now to do with fear. So in this book, it says like when somebody is scared, they go into a forest, and the forest is dark and it's scary, and da 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 da, and then blah blah blah. They get through the forest because they held hands and they walked through the forest. So now every time my son says to me, "Oh, I can't do that, mummy," and I will be like, "Oh, why do you think you can't do it?" And he might say, "Oh, I'm feeling a bit scared." So I use this concept with him as well. So if he's feeling a bit scared, or if he's saying to me, "Mummy, I'm feeling," or "I don't want to do that, I'm too scared, I don't think I can do it, I can't do it, mummy," then I'll often say to him, "Okay, hold my hand, what do we do?" And he says, "We walk through the forest together."
That's so cute.
So it's really teaching him this concept that your fear doesn't have to hold you back. You just need to find a way of holding that fear and walking through it. Like,
love that.
Just because you fear something, that's not a reason to not do it.
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
Yes.
Feel the fear and
Feel
do
the
it
fear.
anyway. You know, I mean, on a personal note, I feel like I have adapted this, what's the word for it? Theology? Yeah. That if someone asks me to do something, or if I'm given an opportunity and it feels scary, I'm going to do it. I'll say yes without even thinking about whether I can do it or not. I'll worry about that afterwards. But I say, if I'm feeling fear, I'm going to move forward in the direction of my discomfort, and then work everything else out afterwards.
Let me ask you something. How do you worry about it? How do you work it out?
Practically. Practically. I turn it into a problem-solving mission. And I think about things logically whilst also soothing myself physically. So whether that is deep breathing, whether that is meditation, whether that is listening to music, whether that is talking to friends that get it, or family members that I know are really going to be supportive of me. And then I practically think about, let me break these steps down, and actually maybe it won't be so scary if I have some kind of oversight and I've already thought through how it could possibly look. Because sometimes the fear is the unknown.
Yeah.
Not knowing what something is going to look like, how it's going to feel.
And that's a really normal fear.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to normalize that.
Yeah.
Like, you're not necessarily meant to feel like, yeah, this feels great. I think it's okay to feel scared.
Yeah. Particularly if it is something that is important to you, something that is really challenging, it is new.
And you value it.
Yeah. Fear is normal in that sense. So what would we say to this lady?
I think what I would say to her is kind of like, and that's why I asked you that question, what do you need? Let's start with that.
Yeah.
What do you need from these people around you? And what do you need from yourself? How do you get that need met within you? Who are the people you're going to pick to help you with this?
Yeah.
You already know what your passion is. So that's great. We figured that bit out, or you figured that bit out already. That's fantastic. Now, how are you going to walk through that forest?
Yeah.
Who's going to hold your hand through it? Not everyone's going to agree with it, and that's fine. You know, you're not living up to other people's ideas of success. You're the adult.
Yeah.
You choose what that looks like for you.
Yeah. And I would just quickly add on that try and separate who you are from what you do. Because that is a huge thing with imposter syndrome, focusing and majoring heavily on the outcomes of success. And in that, we forget who we are, or we think who we are is fused with what we do. But actually, they're very separate things. Who you are enables you to do what you do. So maybe even put down a list, ask people that you trust to say positive things. Ask yourself, you know, what are some of the things that I like about myself? You have a very strong inner critic and you're listening to that voice a lot. But maybe let's make it very intentional for you to be thinking about the positive aspects of who you are. Like someone who's creative, maybe someone who is daring, someone who's compassionate, loud, colourful, whatever that may be. And you can ask other people to contribute to. And then mentally rehearse that, or verbally even say it out loud to yourself.
I would go that step further. I would say to her, get yourself a journal every morning.
Yeah.
Wake up and write down 3 things.
Yeah.
3 things that you are going to love yourself for, not criticize yourself, or love yourself for. Read it before bed.
Yeah.
Do it again the next day. Do it again the next day. Like keep building up that pathway.
You have to make that voice louder, and you make it louder by focusing on it and by repetition.
That's it.
You know, you believe the negative things because you've heard them so many times and you've repeated them so many times.
Yeah.
And the same can be true of the positive things.
Yeah, but we're not repeating it enough.
Yeah.
And I guess the other thing I just want to say, coming back to this idea of, you know, her success and being an imposter, from what I have seen anyway, from in my own clinic and my own experience of it as a professional, you know, imposter syndrome does not discriminate. So whether you're a graduate, whether you're the CEO, you know, I've worked with people totally across that whole spectrum. I've seen it in all of them. And so sometimes we think, oh, but when I get to that place, when I'm that top gardener, when I'm in Home and Garden, or Architectural Digest, whatever it may be, all these worries and everything will have gone. But it's coming back to what you're saying, the career and who you are. It's a separate. They don't link in that same way.
Yeah,
it's not going to fill you up until you start dismantling those beliefs that you've created. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, I hope so too. Okay,
we've got time for one more. I think we do.
Yeah? Okay, let's do one more. Right, so our third and final dilemma for today. We have a woman in her 30s. She's 35 years old and she has recently broken up with her ex. She says, "We were together for 5 years. I ended it as he told me that he didn't want kids, whereas I do. I very much loved him and still do. I wonder if I've made a mistake here in ending what was a good relationship with no prospects in sight. I don't want to end up childless and single in my later years. What should I do?" What's coming to mind for you?
So many things. I feel like I could talk about this one for ages. Okay, I'm going to start with this idea that she's made a decision. And I think that firstly, she's looking at this as a right or a wrong decision, that there's just 2 outcomes here. And I think there can be multiple outcomes to it. But I think the most important thing to think about with outcomes and this idea of like a right decision is sometimes we place emphasis on, well, if I'm going to make the right decision, then surely the outcome is going to be perfect almost straight away. And I think what she's almost left with is, I've made the decision, but I'm left with less than what I started with. Yeah. Like I don't have a child, even though I wanted children, and I've left him because I want children. Well, actually, I don't have children and I don't have a relationship now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually what I'm hearing in all of it is, I think she wants validation.
Yeah, I think so too. Validation that she's not made a mistake.
Yeah.
And I think that we have to really pay attention to values here. I know we talk about it a lot in our work and on this podcast, that, you know, values really do drive us. Values do help us with our sense of fulfillment, our sense of purpose, our sense of meaning in life. And to deny something that is really important to her, which is family, to deny herself of that would mean living an inauthentic life. And I think that is a really hard thing to do, day in, day out, to make the choice to live inauthentically. But on some level, it's an easier choice. It's an easier choice to kind of go with the status quo, to not upset the apple cart.
Well, this is that like difference between short-term gains and long-term gains. You know, often why do we pick the things that we know that aren't very good for us? Because in the short term, it's familiar, it's
feels
easier, it feels good.
Yeah.
Whereas the long term, we don't know if we'll ever get there.
Yeah.
We don't know what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
We haven't felt it yet. It doesn't feel familiar. So we often go back to things that aren't necessarily ideal for us, or we know, like we have that gut instinct. I don't think this is right for me, but I'm just going to keep doing it anyway.
Yeah.
And coming back, I think, to values, you know, we have these 9 domains of what our values are in our life. It's, you know, relationships, intimate relationships, family, career, education, spirituality, community, friendship,
education. Did I say that?
I think there's one more. We'll come back to it. I'm sure we'll remember it. And that they're all different domains, and at different points, those domains can mean different things, but we use them as a compass if that's where we want to go in that direction. So I feel like the fact that she has that value and she wants to go in that direction is already, you know, telling her that probably, yes, although you value relationships, your relationship still maybe needs to overlap with the family element of your value. And if you're not getting that, is this going to fulfill you long term?
And what I like about this, even though she is wondering if she's made the right decision for her, I like that she has made a decision.
I like it too.
Yeah, and she has moved forward, even though it is difficult and painful. And as you say, we can make the best choice for us in the moment, and immediately it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Immediately it feels bad.
Yeah.
It feels bad. Like she still loves her partner, and I'm sure her partner still loves her. So I just want to commend this woman on making such a brave and courageous decision, and to continue to move forward with that. And I think that fear, again, we've spoken about fear in this episode, but fear shouldn't be the determining factor for decisions that we make. You know, I've worked with people who are in relationships and deep down they know it's not right, but fear of being alone guides them to stay. And I think, well, maybe what is the thing that you would want to live with? Regret? Fear? You know, what is going to hold you back? What is going to propel you forward? And I like the fact that she's moving forward with thinking about actually what she wants. And she's moving forward to hope.
Yeah.
And she's taken a risk, because there are no certainties in this life.
Well, and I think that, you know, I love that word hope, because I think that hope can help her to tolerate the uncertainty.
Yeah.
Because there is no guarantees that just because you've broken up with him doesn't mean that you will get a partner and have children. Like, there are no guarantees in life. But I hope that, I really like that word of hope. I hope that she can hold on to that, like use that as a candle through uncertainty. Because you know, when things are uncertain, it can feel really dark.
It's horrible.
It's horrible. It can feel lonely. You just feel like you're fumbling. Like, where am I going? Where is this leading to? It doesn't feel right. I want to go back. Yeah, maybe we weren't, you know, wanting the same things, but I want to go back to him. It feels safe. It feels familiar. Like, at least I had certainty with him.
Yeah.
Might not be the certainty I wanted.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to have children, but at least I had some sort of certainty.
And that's, again, like fear. Something is better than nothing, so I'll stay. So yeah, I just really want to commend you on making this really brave decision to move towards something that is meaningful, important, and something that you place great emphasis on. And I think to maybe, not saying this is the case, but maybe to have stayed, you would be giving up part of yourself to stay. And I don't know if love should feel like that.
I feel like love...
Or has to look like that.
Yeah, I feel like there are different types of compromises to be made in relationships. But it doesn't sound like she wants to compromise on that one.
No.
So if you know that you don't, and, you know, you can have authority when you say that, then you deserve that.
Yeah. And
you are worthy of that.
And vice versa. If someone can also stand, you know, 10 toes down and say, I don't want that, they also can lean with that and move forward with clarity.
And that's one other thing I wanted to come back to, that, you know, sometimes I think we think relationships need to end because we don't love each other anymore. And I think actually what she has created here, and we talk about this a lot in therapy, don't we, is good endings.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
We often understand endings, or I think society often understands endings as abrupt, as painful, as traumatic.
Betrayals.
Like quite negative connotations to them. You don't often get to experience good endings in life, but I think what she and her ex-partner have created is a good ending. They still love each other. I think that's really beautiful, that you can walk away from a relationship and say, I still love you. Yeah, I still love you too. We just don't want the same things.
We're not going in the same direction.
We're not going in the same direction. Our compasses are just not aligning.
Yeah.
They're not aligning right now.
Yeah.
And I think she should be so proud of that. So proud of creating a good, and it might not feel happy right now.
Yeah.
But a good ending that can lead to happiness for her.
Yeah.
Should we talk a bit more about good endings?
Yeah, good endings. Good endings in therapy. I mean, I've had good endings with couples who have uncoupled, consciously uncoupled.
Tell us more.
Either they knew this coming into therapy, or we discovered it in the course of therapy, that it was time for an ending and a considered ending. It wasn't easy. It wasn't a pleasant experience. I mean, sometimes it's a beautiful experience, even though painful. But yeah, a couple realizing that, we are going in different directions, or this is no longer working for us and we are causing each other more harm than good, and actually choosing to see the good in the relationship and to honor the beauty and the love that they had, but realizing that it was time to move forward in a different direction. So that is one way of having a good ending in therapy. But another way that we have a good endings in therapy is between the client and therapist. And we really kind of encourage people to not have abrupt endings in therapy, even if they feel like, oh, this isn't working for me, or I'm done, everything's fine.
Or sometimes it's gone really well and then we don't hear from them.
Yeah. But it's so important to have a good ending, to have a marked space and time to process this journey, because I think endings represent, the coming to the end of a journey. So looking back on the journey, what has been great? What have we really cherished? What have we seen within each other? What have we found in this space? What have created? And to appreciate that, and also look at the things that, we had blips along the way, we had ruptures along the way, and hopefully overcame them. And we can wish each other well as we bring this relationship to an end. They're really important. I find endings so powerful and so moving in therapy.
I think so too. I feel them as one of the richest part of therapy. I feel that you're gonna get so much vulnerability from the client. I feel like we bring so much vulnerability ourselves because we're sharing how we have experienced that client from where they've started to where they are finishing their journey with us.
Yeah.
You know, and our hopes and our wishes for them, and you know what they're taking with them. So I always also say to my clients, like, what do you want to leave with me? You know, now that you're going, what do you not need to no longer carry? What can I just hold for you? And
oh, that's nice.
And you know, if you need to think about it later, you can always imagine yourself back in my room thinking about it with me.
Yeah.
And then it can stay back in here. And
oh, that's so lovely.
But it actually made me think, you know, when she was saying this, coming back to this idea of validation, I wonder if she needs to give herself that validation, but maybe using a professional in the sense where if they know it's not going anywhere, but they maybe want to just have that conversation with an outside observer, like a couples therapist, so that they can have that, you know, communication in a very safe way to be able to say our directions are no longer matching, but we still love each other.
Yeah.
And it's still very intense, but it's time to say goodbye.
Yeah.
And bring it some closure. You know, I would suggest maybe her trying that.
Yeah.
If her ex-partner is also on board.
Yeah.
To do that, depending on, you know, how he's left and how he's feeling.
And maybe even if he doesn't want to, maybe she could access some support to kind of process this herself and to grieve. I think she's grieving the loss of a relationship, which is fair. My friend told me this beautiful quote. I can't remember if she made it up or someone told her, but you know, that grief is the price we pay for love. And yes, it's right, isn't it powerful?
Oh my God, that really touched me.
I know, yeah. And isn't it a beautiful cost, actually? It makes sense that we pay that price for loving someone.
Yeah.
And I think it's a price that we would pay time and time and again for loving someone. So I think that her even processing the grieving of what has been a loving relationship will be really important.
I think that's such a big part of it, isn't it? It's grieving the loss of something that you loved.
Yeah.
Something that you still love.
Yeah.
That you're saying goodbye to.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you say goodbye?
Yeah. Oh. And also, I just want to say that this is another aspect of therapy which I think is really important in saying goodbye and having a planned ending. I think some people want to hang on, in therapy. So I may have people that, you know, I saw weekly, then we've moved to fortnightly, then we moved to monthly. And actually there comes a point, for some people actually that's very fine, and they use it as like an MOT and having a regular check-in. But for some people it's actually good that we end. So they realise that, no, I think I'm okay.
Yeah, they've got that autonomy now.
I've got this, and I can trust what we've done together to carry me through. Maybe I may come back in future, but actually we can end now. And for some people I will actually say, we could carry on, but I actually think it would be good for you to end, for us to end.
Yeah.
And that also can be really good.
Yeah, and that's why I was also saying, you get the other side of it where it's going really, really, really well, and then somebody just can't face the ending.
Yeah.
It's just too
painful.
They've probably had a lot of difficult endings in their life that they can't imagine an ending being a good one. A one that's painful but still good.
Yeah.
And if that resonates with you, I want you to know you can. You can have that. You can prepare for that. You deserve that.
Yeah.
You know, the power of "and" is so powerful. That's something, you can love something and it cannot be
an
and. Yeah, an and.
I had a supervisor, love her. Oh, and I had to say goodbye. That was really hard, saying goodbye to her. We both cried. But she would always famously say, it's an and. I know some people say it's an and or, but I like her phrase.
I like that one.
It's an and.
And.
Yeah. All right, I hope that's been helpful. that's our dilemmas for today,
Yeah.
isn't it? It's been good.
It's been really good today.
What have you learned?
So I'm really going to take away what you said about, not running away from the stories that shape us. You know me and how I love my psychoanalytic, psychodynamic side and training. And it just reminds me of, the shadows that we carry when you said that. And that we all have, it reminded me of my own shadows and how sometimes I have the urge to be like, oh, I don't want to look at that today, or I hope nobody can see that. And actually, no, that's what shapes me. And I need to carry that and own it and look at it and not shy away from it. So that's what you've made me think about today, and I've learned from you.
Cool.
What have you learned today?
I've learnt something that you said.
Okay.
Which is when we were talking about the lady who had the imposter syndrome and the importance of knowing what you need so you can really ask for it. Knowing what you need for yourself, knowing what you need from others. It does start within. It does start within. So the importance of really asking yourself, what do I need? And am I even providing it for myself? Yeah, that's something that I'm going to be taking away with me and thinking about the rest of this week. What I'm asking other people to give me, am I giving it to myself too?
Yeah, start there first. Then I'll ask other people.
Yeah, thanks, Ritz.
You're welcome, Bea. I love speaking with you.
I know, this is always so much fun.
I know, so much fun. The sun is setting. The lighting has changed again, probably.
Yeah.
So sorry about that, guys.
Thank you for bearing with us.
I know. What have you learnt? Let us know in the comments below. We love reading them. It also just sparks, I think, more thinking in definitely me.
Yeah.
So please let us know in the comments, and remember to like and subscribe and follow us on our social channels.
Yeah, and this has been Dr. Vicky
and Dr. Ritz.
We look forward to seeing you on the floor next week.
See you soon, guys.
Bye.
Bye.